Hello and welcome to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge. My name is JJ Hardy and I own Victory Leadership Coaching. But today I have a guest here who does some HR stuff, but I think she goes a little bit deeper than that. I'm going to let her introduce herself, but her name is Sarah Hermanson. Sarah, do you want to give an introduction to yourself and tell us as much as you'd like to about who you are and what you're doing?
Sure, absolutely. So I'm Sarah Hermanson. I own One Above HR, and this business was really born out of a deep desire to have people have joy at work and to see thriving companies. I've got 17 years of executive recruiting experience where I helped companies across Iowa hire. And I loved recruiting, and it was so much fun to help people figure out what they wanted to do when they grew up and help introduce them to companies. But what I found was I got just far enough into an organization to often find that they weren't healthy, that I was helping people take jobs that they weren't going to maybe be completely satisfied in because of some of the cultural or environmental factors in an organization. And so I left executive recruiting. I spent 5 years at ClickStop, which is a rapidly growing e-commerce company in Iowa. And they let me do things I was entirely unqualified to do. And it was so much fun. And so I joined them when they were small. And I did a lot of process efficiency. And we also, as part of a leadership team, we developed an incredibly healthy culture. We created core values that we actually were living out every day. And we would have employee discussions, and they would go back to those core values of, are we really exemplifying the DNA of who we want to be as an organization? And it was so much fun to help grow and build an organization and see a healthy, thriving, fun workplace get created. And that's really where my passion for HR comes from, is that, yes, we need to have solid foundation. We need to be compliant and have our job descriptions and employee handbooks. But at the end of the day, those aren't what make really healthy, thriving environments. And that's not why most of us get out of bed and go to work every day. And so I work with primarily small businesses, but larger organizations. I do some speaking and training, but most of my small business clients, we're having real conversations with executive leadership about how we create a fun, healthy workplace. And so that's the cool stuff I get to do every day.
So when you say fun, healthy workplace, can you go into a little bit of detail on that? That sounds interesting. And most people, when they think of work, they think of relationships and stuff like that. But I don't know if they necessarily think of fun.
Yeah. I think sometimes, there's words in the industry, particularly fancy HR words, that get a bad rap. So the number one word or terminology that you hear HR people talk about is employee engagement. I frankly try to avoid using that terminology because so many people have a negative perception of employee engagement. Does that mean we're running around hugging each other and singing Kumbaya and like we have to be fluffy and we have to, no, that isn't what employee engagement means. It really is about connectedness. It really is about deep, meaningful relationships. And the reality is that we have to be intentional and purposeful to have those connections, particularly in today's workplace where I think we're doing more and more work. And the focus on work, on achieving goals and getting results and being productive is so significant that sometimes we have to be really intentional to make time to say, hi, how are you? What's going on in your life? What's going on in your family? What do you enjoy doing outside of work? And really having connectedness in the workplace. And frankly, that's why I say fun, is because sometimes those relationships get exponentially built in times of fun. That we feel more connected when we've had an experience with each other versus just a conversation at the water cooler, right? And so I think that part of my passion is working with small business leaders to simplify this. It is not heavy lifting. It's not major fancy employee events and activities. It's simply being intentional to create moments of connectedness in the workday or in the work week or in the work month so that people feel that they actually have relationships at work. The statistic that gets me, that just every time I mention it, it makes me kind of want to tear up a little bit, is that the number one reason that most people leave jobs is because they don't think anyone will miss them when they're gone.
Oh no.
That they think that if they were not there tomorrow, nobody would care. And that's such a deep lack of connectedness, right? That just means that they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel valued. To think that there's a large percentage of people that are leaving jobs for that reason is just, it's unacceptable. And it's not difficult for us to overcome that if we're just intentional in creating moments of connectedness.
You know, I have a show called Warrior Leadership where I collaborate with a therapist, and we talk about your nasty term of employee engagement, but we also talk about toxic leadership and culture and all that stuff. And we came up with this term called the island of isolation at work. And I
Mhm.
think that the lack of engagement, because you have to engage with people, you have to get out of your office, you have to walk around, you have to talk to people, you have to figure out what's actually going on and keep your finger on the pulse. I mean, that's the productivity part, but you have to learn about them and understand who they are. And until then, you're not going to figure out what they're strong at, what they're not strong at, what they actually enjoy doing, making sure they're in the right job. If you have if you even have the ability to shuffle people around on your team or in your organization. But what a good way to describe that, because you kind of start to feel like you don't belong, and
Yep.
then you start to isolate there. And that, unfortunately, I think that carries over from one workplace to the next. So when they go to the next job, if they were already isolating, then they're probably going to feel like it's already an unsafe place, that now that new manager has to work 3 times as hard to build that level of trust that's needed, that he probably didn't have to work as hard with the other people that work on his team. And it might come off as kind of a negative thing. So
Right.
people really have to dig a little bit deeper and get to know who they're working with so that they can understand these things. I completely agree with that. I think it's a wonderful way of looking at it. It's a
Yeah.
very, I don't know, it hurts
Well,
my heart to hear that.
I know. That's just it. Like, that's the number one reason. You'd think it'd be money or work hours or some other. No, the number one reason that most people are changing jobs right now is a lack of connectedness.
Mhm.
And so we talk a lot about psychological safety, which again, another big fancy term, but basically it's that environment where I'm at work and I have enough of a relationship, I have enough of a connectedness that I can say something, whether it's feedback or ideas or opportunities for improvement, or even, hey, I can express what I need as a human being because I feel safe in this environment. That doesn't just happen. That doesn't just happen because a manager or supervisor is present. That happens because of connectedness.
Mhm.
And honestly, we don't teach our supervisors and leaders this skill set of of really slowing down. Yes, productivity matters, output matters, we have to achieve the goals of the organization. I'm not in any point or time saying, hey, we're going to stop focusing on productivity. We need profitable, highly revenue generating organizations, but we also have to slow down enough to say, who are you and what's important to you and how are you wired? And did you come from a really healthy workplace before? Or did you come from a really horrible workplace? Because if you came from a horrible workplace, you're bringing that with you. And
Yes.
you've got your walls up and you're holding me at a distance because you don't know that I'm not going to be a jerk the way your last leader was, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes we need to have those conversations and we need to level set and say, oh, I'm so sorry you had a really bad experience in your last workplace. Let me talk to you about my leadership style. Let me talk to you about how I want our relationship to look. Like, we have to have healthy conversations about leadership style and what's going to work when you make a mistake. How's that going to fall out? What's
Yeah.
that conversation going to be like when a mistake happens? Because we're all going to do it. Or as a supervisor, when I need to hear feedback because I'm not serving the needs of the team, how do you give me that feedback in a healthy way? But we don't teach supervisors and leaders how to have those conversations.
Mhm.
And so sometimes we do one-on-ones, right? We sit down and we say, hey, how's your week? And everybody says the F word, fine, right? But we're not really connecting. We're not really talking about the heart of connectedness and really, again, being able to feel safe to give feedback and therefore increase productivity, increase efficiency, because those things come from healthy relationships.
You're
Um,
right. And you know what? Oh,
organizations
go ahead.
organizations that when they do an employee survey, when they have very, very high employee engagement numbers, they also have high productivity, high revenue, high goals. Like, all of those things are connected. And so sometimes leaders, again, they feel like this is the fluffy part, right? Like, the HR person's going to make us, hug and do kumbaya and do all these fluffy things. And the reality is it's not fluffy. It's individualistic. Each leader needs to bring their style to the conversation, but we have to be intentional in connecting with other human beings in the workplace.
True. Every person, whether it's a manager or a supervisor or a VP or an execution level employee, it doesn't matter. We all have something that we're charged with doing. That's why we're paid to do a job. But on the other side of that, those are people. And so what a lot of people forget is that a business is nothing more than a group of people coming together to execute a mission. And when you remember that it's nothing but people, then when you start looking at those reports and you start holding people accountable, then it kind of puts a different spin on things. The reason that servant leadership is so important is because you're constantly looking at other people around you, not the operations manager, but no, that guy that has this part of the job, and saying, how can I support that person better? Or that team that you have working under your charge. Now, those people, they may or may not have everything they need to do to accomplish their work. And that's not just the physical items, but it's also the skills. Maybe they're struggling in an area. And if you're not looking at how you can better serve your team all the time, then you're I don't like to use the word fail, but it is the first attempt in learning. Managers need to understand these things. Yeah. And if you're not constantly doing everything you can every day to make sure that everyone around you is taken care of, then you are a cog in the wheel, and you're not really part of what that well-oiled machine needs to make that business successful.
Yeah, we often talk about kind of the warning signs. And in HR in particular, I understand that no one sees HR as a revenue generating department. They consider it a cost center. I would argue that, and we could get into that conversation, but that's not helpful for today. What we look for that are warning signs, I always call it, these are the signs of smoke, is do you have turnover? Do you have people that are showing up just on time? If they're supposed to be there at 8, they're at 8 or 8:01? Are they leaving the minute that they're able to run out the door? Are they proactively bringing you new ideas and suggestions? Are they exceeding expectations? Do they seem happy? Right? I mean, you can tell if you're paying any attention at all. You can actually measure employee engagement and activity. And again, there's really multiple levels. There's highly engaged, there's engaged, there's disengaged, and then there's actively disengaged. And actively disengaged is dangerous because that person's a cancer. They're trying to bring people with them into disengagement land. And so again, supervisors have to pay attention to this. And all too often, HR is the bad guy for pointing out and noticing these behaviors, when the reality is people don't leave companies, they don't leave jobs, they leave people. Mm-hmm. And so if turnover is happening, a real conversation needs to happen. Sometimes turnover is happening because, hey, they need to follow their spouse. Their spouse is getting relocated to another state. It's not always a supervisory issue. But if we've got repetitive turnover issues, it could be a leadership issue. And again, it's not insurmountable. It's not something we can't fix, but we have to have honest dialogue about it. Yes. I think the thing I love is simplifying this, JJ, is that I think everyone feels like it's hard or it's heavy lifting. It's not. It's about intentionality. It's having calendar appointments and reminders and keeping good notes about your people. I have a horrible memory. It's one of the flaws of having recruited for so many years, is that I think I've done thousands upon thousands of interviews and my brain no longer stores data correctly. And so I'm somebody that when I get to know you, I'm going to make a note about JJ and JJ's life and JJ's families and JJ's hobbies and interests. And it's just genuinely taking an interest in another human being. Human resources, the core of that is human. And the needs we have as human beings never, ever change. Mm-hmm. We want to be heard, seen, valued, and cared for. And those have stood the test of time, like they're never going to change. And so when you take the time to acknowledge someone, and whether it's their spouse or partner or their kids or their dog, or, hey, what did you do this weekend? Or you happen to remember something that they mentioned to you about was coming up on their calendar, that kind of investment creates connectedness. It is the simple little things in life that matter. We
Mhm.
can do all of the employee engagement, employee appreciation weeks. We can do those annually. Those don't have the same staying power as the little tiny things that we do on a
Mhm.
daily basis that create someone, that allow someone to feel seen and valued.
Correct. And when you say make it intentional, I think the first step to that is not necessarily always just putting things on the calendar. I'd like to add to that, and of course, I'm not saying that anything you said was wrong, because everything you said was awesome. But making sure also that if you have your own office and then all of your employees are somewhere else, make sure you're engaging with them every single day if you can help it. I mean, obviously, we all have conflicting priorities and all that other stuff, but let's not use that as an excuse. Let's make it the exception and not the rule. If you're not going out and talking to your people and getting to know them and making it a normal thing for them to have interaction with you, then every interaction with you is going to be an uncomfortable one. And
Agreed.
even if it's not for you, it will be for them. I mean, they need to know that JJ's willing to joke around and be vulnerable once in a while, or that Sarah is willing to have a conversation about something that happened at work that maybe she wasn't successful at.
Yep.
And making sure that all those vulnerabilities and good things that happen, because they need to know that we make mistakes just like they make mistakes, and that that's okay, and that that if they want to improve, then there's conversations that need to be had. But if you never really engage with these people except for when there's a scheduled conversation in your office, first of all, they're going to wonder, am I in trouble?
Yep.
That's going to be the first thing. And
Yep.
the second thing they're going to want that they're going to be thinking when they're in that meeting with you, unless they're a gregarious person, because sometimes people are just excited to get away from work and have a conversation, but they're going to be thinking, man, when can I get done with this so that I can get back to what I was doing, because I'm getting behind here.
Well, and they're uncomfortable. And so we
Yes.
always want to escape anything that's uncomfortable. The other aspect of human nature is if we're confused by something, we tend to dismiss it, not get curious. So when we don't create consistent behavior, when we confuse our team, so for instance, if we're not touching base with them daily, then all of a sudden when we do touch base with them, they're on guard because we've not created that consistent safety. And so I get that some workplaces, it's not face-to-face. It's not as easy as getting up out of your desk and walking down the hallway and getting FaceTime with people. Or again, if they're in a production manufacturing environment, how do I really connect with them when they're supposed to be focused on their machine and their output and what they're doing? And I'm actually a safety hazard when I go to hang out with them. There's still a way to do this. There's still a way to have, whether it's a daily stand-up meeting where, hey, we're all going to grab 5 minutes before the shift, or on a regular break time. Again, in the virtual remote world that many of us are working in, there's still a way to do that. There's still a way to have just a, hey, every day at this time, we're going to connect those that are available. And here's our agenda. It's going to be short and sweet, but I want to make sure we get FaceTime every single day. I know some leaders where they just have an open Zoom and they say, hey, this is my office hours. I'm going to hang out in this Zoom room for an hour. You come whenever you can in that window of time so that we can get some FaceTime and some connect time. Or again, if you've got an issue that I can help kind of knock down an obstacle or take on something with you, or fight a good battle alongside you. And they kind of create a virtual office hour so that people can connect with them without always having to put an appointment on the calendar and always having to make it a thing. And so there is a way to simplify that ability to have consistent connectedness, because consistency wins every single day in the relationship building game. Again, I talk to people a lot of times about how we maintain our cars, we maintain our homes, right? Like we get oil changes, we get new tires, we put new filters in our furnace, we clean our gutters, we mow our lawns. We have consistent routines to maintain our homes and our vehicles. But do we do the same thing in our relationships? And we don't. And then we wonder why we feel relationship strife. And it's because we don't create those consistency and those patterns. And that consistency makes us feel safe, because I know that I'm going to see JJ every day. and I know how JJ is going to behave every day. And I begin to get comfortable with JJ and how he communicates in his behavior. And then I have comfort and safety with him because I have a connection with him. But when the boss only shows up once a week unexpectedly, then we all try to look like we're doing a really great job and we change our behavior. That isn't a healthy relationship. And there's no connectedness, there's no safety in that moment. And so again, we have to simplify it. It's not a heavy lifting scenario. It doesn't need a major budget item. Those are great. I'm all about having fun with my teammates. And I love the idea of some culture building, engagement building, fun activities. If we can get out of the office or bring in lunch or play some games, those are great. But that's not the core of employee engagement.
No, it's not. And there's just building a relationship, and we've said it multiple times during this call here, but if you can't focus on building a relationship and just understanding that all that means is having consistent conversations, then I tell this to people all the time, if you're not ready for that, then you might not ready to be a supervisor or manager, because part of being in that position is that you get to know your people and you understand their strengths and weaknesses. How do you do that if they're not vulnerable with you or they don't trust you? They're not gonna want to talk to you about anything or even show you what they do on a regular basis if they don't understand who you are and believe that you actually have their best interests at heart. If you just show up once in a while or schedule them in a meeting once a quarter to do their performance review or something, then all they're going to show you when you do show up once in a while in person while they're working is you said it, it's just going to be a show.
Yeah.
They're going to be doing that one person dog and pony show because the boss is showing up.
Yep, it's artificial.
Yep.
And again, it's human nature. Any of us put into an unexpected scenario, we go back to perform, our P's and Q's. We mind our manners. We do what our parents taught us, right? We don't open up in those environments because we're still developing that psychological safety. So I would probably be a little more gentle than you are, JJ, in the sense that I understand that some of our leaders are introverts. Some of our leaders, this is uncomfortable for them. This isn't their core gift. Their gift is maybe that they're structure and process minded, and they're an incredible project manager, and their gift is part of their function in the organization. And all of a sudden they've been asked to lead a team, and they're kind of like, that wasn't really what I signed up for, but here I am. And so I still believe, even in an introvert leadership style, we can develop some conversations to make this easy. And it doesn't have to be wildly extroverted. We don't have to be, so it's about what questions, how do we create connectedness? What's their individual style of wanting to create that connectedness? And some of it is, like you said, you go first. I think this is part of that loneliness epidemic that we have, is that so many times we feel uninvited or unincluded. And my answer to that is, well, what are you doing to solve the problem? Because if you're not inviting and you're not including, you can't expect everyone else to do it. But for that introverted leader, that would be how I would start with them is, hey, I know you don't want to interview this person. I know you don't want to ask a ton of questions. I know this is incredibly uncomfortable for you. So you go first. Tell a little bit of your story. Where did you go to school? How did you end up in this career? What was your first job like? And share just a little bit about who you are, because that opens up the door for a natural aspect of them sharing a little bit about who they are. That's how human nature works. If you share your story, it opens up an opportunity for me to share my story. So there's really simple ways for us to create connectedness. You don't have to be an extrovert. You don't have to feel like you've gone to get a master's degree in leadership to do this. It's about customizing this to your personality and your style. And again, this is why I love what I do, is that I get to sit down and say, tell me how you're hardwired. Tell me what keeps you from doing this. Tell me what obstacles are in the way of you really having healthy connectedness with your team. And we all have that one person on the team that we find it really hard to connect with, where they're just that nut we can't figure out how to crack, right? And so having that conversation of, what do you think that's about? Is that you or is that them? because you can't make everybody connect with you. You're going to have a person or two who just say, hey, leave me alone. Let me go do my job. Mm-hmm. And that's okay to a degree. We still have to have a relationship. So we have to customize this because we can't force people. It's like making somebody hug you when they're not a hugger, right? Like that's a really uncomfortable moment. So I always tell people, this is not a one size fits all solution. It's about intentionally creating a plan that works for each individual leader.
Yep. Just like you wouldn't treat all of your employees the same. I mean, every manager is going to be different too. You're right. I did come off a little bit brash when I said some people shouldn't be in a supervisor or management position, but I did allude to the fact that, everyone can be developed. Just like an employee can be developed, so can a manager. I know very many situations. As a matter of fact, my first leadership position I was put into and I was not ready for it. But with the right people surrounding you, understanding the type of person you are, and knowing that you're probably the right person for the job, but there's some things that you need to work on. Anybody, in my opinion, as long as you have that need to be successful, can learn the skills that it takes to be a successful, not just a manager or a supervisor, but to build those servant leadership skills and create a team of people that all trust each other.
Agreed. Yeah. This, I truly believe anyone can be a great leader. And again, it's individualistic. And I think that is the hard part, is there's so many books out there that tell you to do it a certain way. That might not work for you.
Yeah.
That might not be your personality and style, and that might not work in your business environment. And so I think that it can be a challenging environment to navigate, because we're getting all these different messages. And I would never want a leader to feel like they're a failure, when the reality is, no, this is just about taking the time to create a plan that works individualistically. I look at it like when we go to see a physician, they don't just prescribe. They go through a diagnostic process of what's going on and how did we get here and how long has this been happening, and that is the same thing that I love to do from an HR standpoint. Is it's this diagnostic process, and that allows us then to figure out, okay, well, maybe this will work, and perhaps this is a different approach. And I think that again, I feel lucky every single day that I get to have these creative discussions to simplify how we create more connectedness at work.
I completely agree. And on top of that, not only can anybody be a leader, you don't have to be in that management or supervisor position. I know many people who, when the boss isn't around, they are squaring the team away and, showing that those servant leadership qualities and really taking care of people. And unfortunately, they would never, ever want to be in a supervisor position. They just want to be left to do their work. So, I mean, gosh, anybody can do it. And most people are doing it and don't even know it.
In fact, those are the golden employees. Those are the employees that if again, as a leader, if you can find that person on the team that just has that natural kind of glue, that connectedness. And sometimes I mean, no disrespect to the grandmas out there, but I think of them as the grandma on the team, the one that just loves people naturally. And they just have that trait of nurturing and connecting people. That person is vital to your team, because you might not be the warm and fuzzy person, and you might not do the birthday cards or remember important dates, but that person will, and that person will help you be a better leader. And that person keeps your team more closely connected because of their natural nurturing ability. Mm-hmm. And then you just need to make sure you're loving that person, because you don't want to lose them.
Well, we could do a whole other conversation on people as a resource and how you can utilize your resources in your current role. But we are almost at 30 minutes. And I always, at the end of every podcast and call that I do, Sarah, I ask, is there anything, whether it's a special message or even a promotion or something like that, that you would like to share with the audience who's watching right now?
No, I've got puppies here. So I loved our conversation, and I'm looking forward to a really busy fall. I've got a bunch of speaking engagements and conferences. So that would be the only thing, is that if you have a team that you need a new voice or a new perspective to come to a training, or you've got a Rotary group or other association meeting and you're looking for a creative speaker, I'd love to be on your short list. I'd love to share new ideas and get people talking about how we create joy at work.
Thank you for being a guest today, Sarah, and I apologize for that.
Oh.
The wonderful thing about being live at home, right?
Yep.
But
My little guy right here, he just was quiet today.
He was just quiet today. Oh my gosh. And that would have been a high-pitched one. Look at that. He looks just like the awesome little dude. Yeah, so thank you for being a guest. Thank you everybody for watching. If this content resonates with you, please like it, subscribe to it, reshare it with your audience so they can see it. But the most important thing below is that if you have a passion for leadership, you should put a comment below and keep the conversation going. Thank you everyone for watching now and in the future, and we'll see you next time.